Hey y'all, thank you for joining us today for the very first session of our virtual event series, Indomitable Conversations. I'm Di Cerullo, author of the newly released memoir, Indomitable, A Foster Care Story. I am truly grateful to have you join me and our amazing guests this week for a week of transformative talks. So today marks a special occasion as it's not only the end of a very long road bringing this story to life for me, but it's the beginning of conversations that we will have to bring justice and healing and peace to those who share in our stories. This memoir was deeply personal and reflects my experiences within the foster care system, but it's also a call to action, a testament to resilience, and a rallying cry for reforming the foster care system in the United States. We're not just here to share stories, we're here to make a difference. So, over the course of the next week, we will have the privilege of hearing from remarkable individuals who have not only survived but thrived in the face of adversity. These influencers, survivors of the foster care system, and advocates will inspire us with their insights, their experiences, and the incredible resilience that defines the human spirit. But this isn't just about listening, it's about taking action. By the end of each session, I invite you to reflect on what you've heard and consider how we can collectively work toward meaningful change. Let's turn this story into a lens we can use to take action in our own communities. So before we dive into our first interview, I encourage you to engage, ask questions, and be part of this movement. Share your thoughts and experiences in the chat, and let's build a supportive community dedicated to improving the lives of children in foster care. Lastly, of course, if today's session resonates with you, I humbly invite you to grab your copy of Indomitable, A Foster Care Story from wherever you buy your books. Thank you for being here today. I can't wait to embark on this inspiring journey with all of you. So today's guest is Mary Holiman. Mary has years of experience volunteering and working with organizations centered around bettering families and their communities through providing support, after-school programs, positive discipline training, and other resources, with her most recent experience focused on providing violence and substance misuse prevention education and trauma support to K-12 aged school children. Ooh. As the new organizing and communications director at RISE, she's excited to use her background in criminology and psychology, her passion for media, and her interest in reforming the system that criminalizes poverty to help create change. Woo! Instead of being a voice for the voiceless, she believes in the power of those affected to speak for themselves. Amen. She holds a master's in public health with a focus on community health science, and she is an advocate for interdisciplinary approaches to well-being. Fantastic. How are you today, Mary?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's been a few hectic weeks over here at Rise, but overall I'm feeling pretty good.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of good things going on at Rise as well. So
absolutely. Well, tell us about it. How did you find your way to Rise?
So I was in the position where I was looking for a new job, and I knew I wanted to kind of stay within sort of the same field of like public health, helping families, helping communities, but I wasn't really sure where to look, so I was kind of like just applying anywhere and everywhere. And then I came across Rise. I think I landed on their website somehow, and I saw that they had a job opening for this position, and then I read what they were doing, the work that they were doing, how it was for parents impacted by the system, by parents impacted by the system. And I was like, I can see myself working here. That's what I like to do. I like working with organizations that include the people that are harmed by the systems we're trying to reform, because I've been in a lot of spaces and in a lot of nonprofit sectors where they were providing like care and treatment to the community, but the community wasn't really involved on how they went about that care and treatment. And as someone who's also been affected by multiple traumas in my own personal life, it felt a little too much kind of like a science experience almost, of where they were just like, they were numbers and statistics and data, but they weren't really being seen as people. And I just, as I kind of touched on it in my bio, I really believe in elevating the voices of the people. That's why I try not to use the word voiceless,
Mhm.
because I believe that they do have a voice. A lot of times their voices are just overshadowed. So by
Mhm.
elevating their voices and letting them play an active role in their own healing and letting us know, like, telling them what they need to survive instead of someone else coming in and saying, "Oh, I think this will be best for you." When we don't really know because everyone is different. So.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, the people who are telling you what they think is going to be best for you, they don't even have the same shared experience. So it's not even like they're coming from an impacted place. They're just saying, "Oh, well, I think this is what you need to do to be like me or to be successful," or perhaps not even, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or a lot of times it's they researched it or
Oh, yeah.
they read a paper on it, and those are all valid. They're all, credible sources, but at the same time it's not the actual people themselves. And I'm always of the belief, like, the people know what they want and they know how they need to be supported.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what would you say Rise does? What kind of services do they provide, and what kind of advocacy are they working on?
Well, right now we're working on our campaigns surrounding childcare and mandated reporting. We tied it together because we noticed while doing our surveys that one of the main reasons behind mandated reporters are being called, or they're making a report, is due to lack of childcare or inadequate childcare, such as leaving an older sibling with a younger sibling. And so that's why we're focusing on the two. So right now we're really pushing for respite care, which is temporary emergency care. Respite care typically is associated with like elder adults or senior citizens who need a little bit of extra care, but there's really not one for children. And
Mhm.
like standard daycare centers are typically regular work hours, 9 to 5, 10 to 6, but there's so many parents out there that do not work those hours. And
Mhm.
so when you are working the night shift, what are you supposed to do? You're potentially putting yourself at risk of having a case if you don't have childcare to cover your night shift, because standard hours are tied to typically a 9 to 5.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of families have to take on a second or maybe even third job that maybe don't work the same hours as other folks. And childcare is just one of those absolutely outrageous costs to having children. So, I mean, even just myself, I know what I pay for childcare. I can't imagine how anybody else is getting any of this done. I am regularly just like, oh my God, how are we even going to make this work? So, I consistently think about that. Um, it impacts all of us parents.
Yes, so that's what we're pushing now is emergency care for parents and childcare that's not tied to work hours, because we're
Mm,
also seeing that sometimes, parenting is hard. I'm not a parent myself, but I have a lot of friends that are parents. I have a lot of friends that are single parents, and
mhm.
it's hard. There's
Sure.
sometimes they're just tired, and sometimes they're like, I just want a break. I just want 2 hours for myself where I can, like, take a shower or
Oh, yeah.
sleep or just not have to worry about the baby. And so
Yes.
we're really trying to push emergency childcare relief that's not even just for parents that have been impacted, but for parents in general, because we're seeing that it's hard, and sometimes, you just want a break, but parents aren't really allotted that space to kind of like breathe or say, this is actually really hard and I'm struggling
Right.
right now to, like, take care of myself. And at Rise, we really focus on the idea that you can't be your best self if you're run down and ragged. And it
Absolutely.
makes it even harder for you to take care of someone else when you're not your best self.
Hmm.
So that's why we're really pushing this for parents. And on our mandated reporting side, we're trying to change how mandated reporters are being trained. Um,
Mm,
One thing that we're seeing is a lot of times mandated reporters are pretty much penalized if they don't report things. If they're not
right.
calling something in, it they can technically not only just be sued, they can also lose their job and have their license revoked because it's considered, because they are legally by law are required to report it. If they don't report it, they're potentially putting themselves at risk. And we all live in a world now where no one wants to lose their job. No
No.
one wants to lose their livelihood. And so, of course, you're naturally inclined, if your job is at risk, to do something, even though in your heart you may feel like, this mom, she said the kid's not going to school right now because she doesn't have money for uniforms. I could give her a Target gift card, or I could give her like a check or a grant to go buy uniforms. I could do that, but then at the same time, if I don't call this in, I'm risking my job. And it becomes a very, very slippery slope, that it becomes the battle between, do I help this person and risk my job, or do I just go ahead and report it and then potentially hurt this family and lead them to separation? So just trying to train mandated reporters to be a bit more confident and let them know that actually you can help the parent. You can do something. You can provide support. And if you don't feel comfortable, putting yourself at risk, there are other organizations such as Rise Ourselves that can provide you with assistance to help this family.
Absolutely. What would you change, do you think, about how they're trained? So, from my perspective, I know a lot of times I was let down sort of throughout my story by, quote unquote, mandated reporters. So if they are, and I don't mean this to blame teachers or for sort of anybody
Mm-hmm.
else, obviously teachers and all mandated reporters right now are absolutely overburdened by the needs of a system that is constantly asking so much more of it than any one person or any one system or any one community might be able to bear. What do you think needs to change there if people like me are being let down by mandated reporters on the one hand, if abuse looks a certain way versus mandated reporters perhaps over reporting in situations where maybe it wasn't necessary? What do you think needs to change there?
It's quite a few things, and I'm glad that you mentioned teachers, because that's another big where a big amount of calls are coming in are from the school systems as well, because of things like a kid missing school, or a kid saying to their teacher, "Oh, I'm hungry." That's going to raise a little red flag, like, the
Mm,
kid said they're hungry, does that mean they're not eating at home? What's going on?
sure.
And so a lot of it actually has to do with the language. So right now we just released our language glossary, and because we recognize that the system is not going to change overnight, it's not even going to change within a few years. It has to be an ongoing, continuous process. But one thing that we can do right now is change our language and change how we refer to certain things. So one of the things is now, instead of saying child welfare system, say family policing system, because child welfare, it has the connotation of what you're doing is always in the best interest of the child and family. And we're
Mm,
seeing that a lot of times it's not in the best interest of the child and family. It's
mm,
not about the welfare of the child. A lot of times it ends up doing a lot more trauma and damage, even though that may not have necessarily been their intention. And
right.
change and start saying family policing system or family regulation system, because then that kind of explains better of what's actually happening when these calls are being reported. That's what's happening. A family is going to get investigated. There's going to be some regulation. Sometimes it leads to removal, and also changing language of how parents, of how we're seeing abuse and neglects, things that we may think of, like for example, like a kid who's saying I'm hungry, that might automatically raise a red flag of, oh, a child is hungry, they're automatically being neglected. But
Mm,
that doesn't necessarily mean that the parent is purposely neglecting their kid or
mhm,
that they're a bad parent. It could be mom just lost their job and groceries and money is really tight right now. It could be something like that.
yeah.
And so, and changing how we view certain situations, and also reaching out to the family and parent first before you make that call can do a lot too. But there also has to be some trust established as well, because that's one of the, when we did our survey, we saw that a lot of parents are reluctant to even ask for help
Of
because
course.
they're afraid of the judgment, they're afraid of the shame, they're afraid of getting a case.
Mm-hmm.
And so it also has to deal with like restoring the trust between mandated reporters and between mandated reporters and families.
Mm-hmm.
Letting, and that's a big change that has to be made, as well as reestablishing that trust, so people are actually more willing to say, you know what, yes, my kid is hungry, I am behind on bills, I could really use groceries, and getting them access to a fridge, a community fridge, or a food pantry, because there's so many programs and organizations out there that actually are providing these resources, but parents don't know about them because they are afraid and they are carrying that shame and guilt. So
Of
they
course.
can't know that it's available if they're afraid to even ask. And the reason why they're afraid to ask is because of that fear and that lack of trust, that if I go to this mandated reporter and tell them that I need help,
Mm-hmm.
am I actually going to get help, or am I automatically going to be shamed for being a bad parent and get a case and then potentially have my kids removed?
Absolutely. So I think here in Massachusetts, where I live, and this is a comment from a Facebook user, that at the schools we have free breakfast and free lunch now available for all students. So, do you think that that is a positive change that'll be picked up nationally, or do you think, what do you think about free food programs through the schools? I guess is my question.
I think that's something that I personally am for free school lunch and breakfast. I've
Right.
seen in the news that a lot of schools now are basically saying if you don't pay your bill, the kid doesn't eat and things like that. And for me, I see I kind of see school as a job, because kids, they're typically there like a work day, 9 to 5,
Yeah.
sometimes even earlier. I know when I got to school, I was at school by 7:15, so I was
Hmm.
at school before my parents were even at work half of the time.
Absolutely.
And so it's like if they're there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, that's a 40-hour work week. Essentially,
Hmm.
is just, except instead of going to a job, they're going to school. But for kids, school is their job. They have to get good grades. They have to behave. It's technically a job for them.
Yeah.
And I think about it as like, I'm like, legally you are required to give an adult a lunch break, even if it's only
Right.
30 minutes. Why are we not providing free breakfast and lunch
Yeah.
for a place children are required to be by law?
Right. No, absolutely. I was a beneficiary of free breakfast programs and free lunch programs myself, growing up in the Massachusetts foster care system. And many times that was the difference between whether or not I would eat that day. So when Massachusetts came down and said post pandemic, even that they would be carrying this program forward and that it would be available to all students regardless, I remember just feeling so relieved and moved by the fact that people understood what children were actually trying to overcome day to day and how important it was to be able to have food in your body, to be able to learn, and how much of a difference having not having to worry about where your next meal was coming from made in the lives of children just trying to survive and just trying to learn and just trying to get ahead. So I think for me it mattered so much to be seen in that way, and I was very grateful. Although very much, I mean, it was the 90s, so there was still quite a bit of shame associated with that that I would rather not see. And I think what we're doing now in Massachusetts, which I think is I'm very proud of actually, is that everybody gets free lunch. So it's not really a stigmatizing decision that people are making. Either you have to like tell them that you get free lunch or tell them that you get free breakfast or any of that sort of thing. I think making it inclusive for everyone really took away the stigma in a way that I would like to see that happen nationally, because I think that, of course, children should eat. Of course, we should feed them. Why are we accumulating debts for children for feeding children? That's absurd to me. Every parent everywhere should feel that this is absolutely abhorrent to let kids go hungry. Anybody that's arguing that kids should go hungry, I just cannot connect, because that just lets me know that you've never been hungry, because there is nothing that feels that way. There is nothing that inspires that same level of fear and anxiety in your body. So for me, very excited about our free breakfast and lunch programs, and I hope to see it go national. So that's just my opinion on the matter.
Yeah, I was also, well, at first I wasn't, most of my school, I grew up in South Carolina, so I was educated in the South Carolina public school system. And my school, most of us were low income.
Mm-hmm.
And at first, and the free lunch was based on income. So
Yes.
at first, I paid for my lunch because my parents' income, but I very clearly remember the exact moment my parents' income decreased because my dad got a massive pay cut.
Mm-hmm.
And it was hard. Like,
of course,
seemingly overnight, we went from me bringing my lunch to school sometimes and all the kids saying like, oh wow, your mom made that, it looks so good, to me and my mom lining up at a food pantry because we didn't have enough food. And I remember the school lunch ladies that were, honestly, I know they were risking their careers and I know they were risking their own livelihood to make sure that all of us at that school, if we could not pay a bill, we still ate. Because I know my school did this whole thing where they're like, oh, well, if you can't pay your lunch bill, you won't get the regular lunch, but we'll give you a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Which is, it's food, but it's small in comparison to like what all the other kids around you.
And it's intentionally different. It's intentionally different.
It makes you feel other, like, oh, I'm the kid with the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Everyone knows now that I can't afford my lunch bill.
Yes.
So they were like, no, not gonna do that. Everyone is getting something from the hot lunch line.
Good.
So
bless those lunch ladies, because honestly, I remember just how much pressure it put on me to be hungry, not know how to deal with that, and on top of that, be so othered by the experience of kids knowing that I was on free lunch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kids knowing that,
they
like, I was so,
they make fun of you.
Of course they do. And I mean, as a parent today, I am stunned that that wouldn't be one of our considerations when we're raising our children, not to make them feel superior, or you know what I mean? Not to make them feel superior to other children that couldn't afford, like, who on earth? Like, what's the point of that, y'all? That's not what we do anymore, right? Okay, so before we go off on a super long tangent about like about all that again, I want to get to this because I loved this line in your bio. You talk about reforming the system that criminalizes poverty to help create change. And when I first read the line, I was like, bold. I'm like, do not forget to ask her about this. Talk to me a little bit about what you mean by a system that criminalizes poverty.
So basically what I mean is a lot of the things that that lead to involvement with the system, whether it's foster care, child protective services, things like that, are stemming from a lack of resources. And like the theory of social disorganization and broken windows that says the more likely a community is to have broken windows, that also means it's more likely to have less resources, less community support, less youth programs, less housing, and things like that. And it's really punishing people for things that can be fixed if they did have those resources.
Of course.
Like a lack of housing.
Mm-hmm.
Why evict a family and put them and have them in a shelter or have them on the street, causing more trauma and damage, which is going to lead to more things in life when you can give them a rent check?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or why report a family for a kid that's saying I'm hungry when you can give them free food, when you can give them groceries, when you can give them free school lunch, especially since they're spending 8 hours a day there, things like that. And it's really punishing people for not doing well in a system that is intentional to make them fail. Especially now when so many things are tied to your job, like health insurance, dental insurance. All these things are tied to your job. Like I'm not really I don't know for sure like all of the laws regarding like EBT and things like that, but I know in some states you have to work a certain amount of hours in order to even qualify.
Yes.
But it doesn't take into account for parents that may be disabled and can't work or may have a sick kid. And so it's like we're punishing people for being poor when we can just give them what they need.
Why do you think that that failing in a system that is designed so unequally is set up to make you feel both the people that are failing feel like a failure and the people that are managing to get by feel like it's okay to feel like those people are failures that just aren't trying hard enough, that just aren't pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak? Why do you think that exists that way?
I think it's intentional, and I think it's done like that on purpose so people don't realize how broken the system is, because it teaches you that they're just not trying not hard enough. They're lazy, they want to live off the system, they don't want to do work. If you can teach the general population and the masses that those that don't have are merely just not working hard enough, the system's never going to change, because then people are like, oh, it's not the system that's broken, it's not the system that needs to be reformed, those people are just lazy.
Of course.
And then it keeps it working, and then it keeps us pitted against each other as well, because then now it's like no one's actively fighting for better. And then a lot of times when people may have slightly a little bit more than someone else, they see it as, I got this off of hard work, but a lot of times they leave out all of the things that may have helped them along the way. Someone down the line gave them a handout, and they're just not seeing it because they're so used to saying I did all of this by myself through hard work. And it also teaches people that are being penalized by poverty are lazy. Everyone I know that is low income, I grew up most of low income once my dad got a pay cut and my mom lost her job. And my dad would leave for work at like 6 in the morning and get home like 7, 8 p.m. at night. And I'm sitting there like, what do you mean he's not working hard enough? He missed out on so many parts of my brother and I's childhood because he was always at work. I literally just had a conversation with my dad about a few weeks ago, where he was like, I missed so many school events. I couldn't show up because I couldn't get off work. If I didn't work, then you didn't eat. You didn't have new school clothes. And I'm just like, how can someone ever say you aren't working hard enough when, because you worked so much, you physically couldn't be there for the things that I wanted so bad for him to be there for?
Of course.
He couldn't because he was at work.
Yep. Absolutely. The people who just need to work harder to get farther are always the people, anywhere in the world, the people who we are looking down on are the ones that are working the longest shifts, the most laborious work, the most physical manual labor. You're just like, it's incredible to me that we are comfortable feeling that way about each other, given these circumstances. In the same vein, why do you think people need to think kids in foster care are somehow responsible for the situation that they find themselves in. And what I mean by that is it was always my experience as a foster kid that people were not necessarily afraid of me, but very much looking down on me, very much feeling like I must have had some involvement in my own circumstances in order for, I assume, for them to sleep comfortably at night, right? Why do you think we need to feel that way about foster kids?
I think it's because it's partially of how we're socialized to believe in like the nuclear family. Like we're raised to when we think of family, it's mom, dad, two kids, a dog, nuclear family,
Right.
aunts and uncles, cousins, neighbors. They're even if they are a part of your family and even if they are like helping raise you, they're extended. They're not considered a part of that family unit. And I think so when people see foster care kids, I feel like for us, when we're so conditioned and raised to believe in the nuclear family, two parent households, foster kids kind of go against that
Yeah,
because they're not a part of the nuclear family.
right.
Their nuclear family is broken essentially. They
Mhm.
don't have the typical mom and dad. They may have a foster parent or a foster mother, or they may be being raised by an aunt or uncle or a cousin or someone else in the family. So it goes against that nuclear family. And
Right.
so anything that's not the standard or deviates from that is automatically seen as bad. It's kind of the way we look at single parents too, like, oh, single mom, we're
Mhm.
punishing the parent that stayed.
Yeah.
That's it's like, how are we punishing the parent that stayed and is doing their
Mhm.
best to raise it over the parent that's not there?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's like
Absolutely.
foster kids are going against that nuclear family standard that we've all been raised to believe in and support. So it's like, oh, what, we take it as something's wrong with them.
Of course.
Like I know, like me personally, I was not in the foster care system, but I did grow up in a very hectic household, and I
Mhm.
remember when people, so like my family looked so perfect on the outside. We had a house, we had a yard, my mom and dad were there. So when I started telling people that actually I'm not very happy at home, my
Mhm.
parents fight a lot, I don't like it, I feel like I'm being traumatized in my own home,
Right.
people would look at me like, so what did you do? Like when I started telling people I don't necessarily have the best relationship with my mom, it's a little strained, people automatically said like, oh, you don't have a good relationship with your mom, what
Mhm.
did you do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it was me going against that nuclear family, it was automatically seen like, oh, you're going against this, you're the problem, you're the flaw.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think that's also why foster care kids are often seen as problems, because they're going against that nuclear family standard. Because
Mhm.
you're already, most of the time, you're already raised to believe in that extended family and believe in not just your mom and dad, but other people are raising you, and it's that pushes back against so many. And for a lot of people, it's very hard to let go of something that's been ingrained in you, especially when society is still so pushing forward towards that.
Right.
Even we see it now with adopting with like same sex couples. They're like, you
Mhm.
need a mom and a dad, you need a man
Mhm.
and a woman. It's like, do you really need that, or does the kid just need to be loved and
Love,
happy
fed. Yeah,
and
no,
fed and
absolutely.
taken care of and supported? Do we really need the mom and dad?
Yeah. No, that comes up kind of a lot. People will say to me, "Oh, well, Di, you grew up in foster care. What do you think of these, same-sex parents?" And I will tell you what I always told them, which is I should have been so lucky. Are you kidding me? Two parents that loved me, two parents that wanted to make sure I got fed, two parents that could have made sure that my hair was done right. You are kidding me. You're kidding me. I was going to worry about that? No. Kids in foster care have real problems, y'all. If you seriously think anybody's worried about that, you are out of your mind. It's profound to me what we make the issues when we talk about things that are system wide. It's
Mm-hmm.
incredible to me because it seems as if the point is to point out things that aren't the problem, get people riled up about it, and never address the system-wide issues and never, ever change anything. And that to me, since this has been the same way since I was a child, I'm 40 now, you have to be kidding. The fact that we are moving so slowly as to barely be recognizably moving at all is incredible to me. And the fact that so many families that are queer and gay are working so hard to adopt kids out of the foster care system and take care of kids in the foster care system, it's a unless you are literally fostering children, I do not want to hear your opinion on who should be allowed to foster children. That like it's incredible that we have these conversations when so many members of the queer community are the ones that are coming in and rocking those children to sleep at night and making sure they're fed and making sure they're loved.
Mm-hmm.
Loved is what matters. Fed is what matters. Who's doing it is so much not the point. No, you're exactly right.
Yeah, and it also just goes back to how we're also raised to be very individualistic, and like we're
Mhm.
losing that
Yes.
sense of community. Like
Yes.
for me, growing up in a very small town, it was my community that I started relying on. I remember, I'll never forget her. I love her to death. I just talked to her about a few weeks ago actually. My chorus teacher in high school, she pulled me to the side and she was like, Mary, so she's like, you're focused in class.
Yes.
You always doing your work. She was like, you're starting to act out. I noticed you're becoming like a shell of yourself. What's going on? And I was honest. And I said, and I told her, I was like, my home life is not a very good place for me right now.
Yes.
And I am stressed out and I'm depressed and anxious. And I told my parents, and they don't think anything is wrong. And so I call her mom sometimes. I call her a second mom because she listened to me and she heard me, and she would come up with ways to get me out of the house on weekends. She was like, "Oh, I want to borrow Mary to come do this," or "We have a presentation for school coming up. Can she come over to my house and practice?" That was her way of making sure that when my weekends are not filled with my parents yelling at each other back and forth. That was her making sure that I wasn't breaking up fights, scared that, oh my gosh, am I going to have to call the cops on my own parents? That was her way of supporting me,
Sheltering you. Yeah.
sheltering me, making sure I had a safe space. And I knew that I had a safe space with her.
Yeah. Yeah. That just that safe adult. And I tell people this a lot, just that one act, that one safe adult that can like doesn't even need to be somebody who comes in and adopts you, but somebody that can just see you where you're at and understand you and sort of give you that stability, that can give you roots, that can give you a place in the world, that can make you feel like the world isn't an entirely scary place and that you're not going to make it. Many times throughout my story, I had one person that would see me, and it just made all the difference. So I definitely can appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the most important thing people get wrong about the foster care system is?
Um,
Just to spring that on you.
um, I have quite a few things I think people get wrong. I think people get wrong that it's automatically a safe haven
Yes.
for I hate using the word unwanted, but like children
Mm,
that have been in certain predicaments. I feel like a lot of people think of it as automatically a safe haven just for what I've seen, especially now with like the whole loss of access to like reproductive care and things like that.
mm,
I see now a lot of people saying like, "Oh, if you don't want your kid, just put them in the foster care system." It's like it doesn't work it doesn't work
Not at all.
the way they think it is. They
Nope.
see it as, oh, you put them in the foster care system, someone's going to
Mm-hmm.
be ready to adopt them, and they're going
No.
to live their best life. And it's like a
Yes.
lot of those kids are aging out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those
Right.
kids are aging out and are being passed around like a
Mm-hmm.
toy. Like,
Absolutely.
and
Through
I
all
feel like
manner of abuses. Yep.
and I feel like that's one of the main things people get wrong. They see it as automatically a safe haven. Like, oh, you don't want your kid, just
Mm-hmm.
put them in foster care. They'll be fine. Like, no, it doesn't
Absolutely.
work that way. So I think that's
Absolutely.
one thing. If I had to narrow it down to like one major thing, I would just say I
Oh,
feel
no
like
doubt.
people see it as an automatic safe haven,
Right.
and then when you try to tell them about the harms and horrors that are going on, people don't like to hear it
No,
because
they don't.
I've
Right.
also heard people saying, well, it's better than nothing.
Better than where they were.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I'm like, I don't think
Yes.
constantly
Mm-hmm.
re-traumatizing someone is better. I'm like,
No.
our
Yes.
best solution cannot be trauma.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Absolutely. That is absolutely accurate. And that was absolutely my experience as well. I would regularly be told, oh, anytime I tried to speak up, anytime I tried to say, look, this is happening to me, it's wrong. I know it's wrong. I go to all these assemblies where you tell me that this is wrong. I'm trying to report this. Believe me. And they would be like, oh, no, we believe you. It's better than where you were. Right. And you're like, what do you mean better? What do you mean better? What are you accepting on my behalf because you've decided that this is okay for me? What about me makes me less worthy of the protection that you would provide your own children with? What do you mean? And that has always been one of the stunners, one of the things that people just say so casually. They'll just drop it and never having considered what they mean by that. So no, absolutely, especially in this day and age. I had somebody ask me, I was giving an interview, it was like 8 a.m, and she was like, Di, now that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, what do you think is going to happen to all of these children that are now going to come pouring into an overburdened foster care system? And I was like, girl, it is like 9 a.m. I need to talk about this with you right now. But no, she was absolutely right. And there is absolutely no money, no extra services in the entirety of the foster care system. We're at about 500,000 kids in the foster care system, already overburdened. And here we
Mhm.
come deciding that we're not going to provide any additional services, any additional funding, any additional anything. We're just going to take away people's reproductive rights and force them to have children
Exactly.
that they can't afford. And that to me is the opposite of pro-life. That is the opposite of being for children. So agree
Yeah.
to agree.
Yeah,
Oh,
I just got into it with in an argument with someone the other day because we were talking about it, and I said we warned you that this was going to happen when
yes,
Roe versus Wade was going to be repealed. That more
yes,
children that do not have a safe space and home to go to are going to be born, and they're going to have no place to go, and they're going to end up in a system that
yes,
traumatizes and harms them.
yes.
And he was like, well, I was adopted and I had a great success story. Both of my adopted parents gave me so much love. And I said, I respect that your experience. And I'm very glad that happened to you. But I'm like, that is not the reality from most kids there.
Absolutely. And adopted isn't quite the same as passed around foster care, is it?
And that's what I was trying to tell them
In
too.
fact,
Because
quite a different experience, isn't it? Yes, but they don't seem to know that whenever we want to
yeah, a
talk
lot of
about it.
people think he kept saying I was adopted and I have a
Oh,
great life. I'm like, that's
yeah,
not the
that's
system
because you
though.
were
That's
wanted.
different.
That's a very different thing than being not wanted and being superfluous, being passed around, being never needed, never wanted, and absolutely every word out of your mouth is more than they want from you. Like how incredibly like naive is this person to have suggested that being adopted by wanting parents is the same thing as being put in foster care. That's I mean, that's incredibly naive. I
Yeah, I
feel
was
for you because I would have been screaming. I wouldn't
yeah,
be a
and
good person.
And I was trying to be respectful because I was like, you know what? I've never been in the foster care system and I've never
No,
been adopted. So I'm not going to talk over you. But I was also
yeah,
just like, that's not, I'm like,
no,
adoption and foster care is completely different things. And
no, yes,
your good experience does not mean that
yes.
that's not the reality
Does
for
not
most of these
speak for
kids.
the entirety of the foster care system. Oh my gosh. Woo, girl. Woo. I'm already sweaty.
I was just like,
I can't even imagine having that conversation because I can't even imagine my hair not catching fire. Okay. All right. One more question. So, what do you find the conversation that you are playing sort of on repeat? Like, what are you constantly needing to teach people about? What are you constantly correcting people about? What do you find yourself saying in every single conversation practically? I have my own frequently asked questions. What is your most commonly had, conversation that you're constantly having?
uh, a conversation that I'm constantly having, um, it honestly would just be explaining to people that the system is doing way more harm than people think. And I know like social workers and all those other people are supposed to be advocates, but that does not mean that they can do better. And I say that because I've been seeing a lot lately of people just throwing the CPS and foster care around like it's candy. They're like, oh, call CPS. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you guys don't know what you're doing when
Yeah,
you call them. You think you're
absolutely.
doing a good thing because child protective is in the name,
Hmm.
but it's not necessarily a good thing. I'm like, you could potentially be making life so much more harder for that family than when it
Yeah,
needs to be if you were actually moving with compassion and moving with genuinely wanting to help instead of being nosy and wanting to punish someone. So I
absolutely.
would say that's what I'm constantly trying to tell people is how the system is not what they think it is. And I feel like people aren't really grasping that a little bit.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, obviously, given the rest of the conversation we've had today,
Yeah, so like
that's
that's
not.
the one thing I'm constantly saying, and but I'm also constantly saying that just because it's like this, that
Hmm.
doesn't mean it can't get better. That doesn't mean it's a lost cause. There are
Yes.
ways for it to improve. It's
Hmm.
gonna take a while, but accepting it the way it is now isn't helping. I mean,
Right.
it's 2023 and it's still
Hmm.
moving the same way it was
Yeah.
years ago. So
Sure.
for me, it's just like we're doing the same thing and expecting different results. That's not gonna work.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Absolutely. I agree. Moving at a glacial pace is accepting things on behalf of children that aren't yours. I agree. Nope. You are absolutely right. Well, this has been such a fantastic conversation, and I want to be mindful of your time. So I am going to close us out. Do you want to share any locations where people can find your work or any social sites that you might be
Yeah, I
urging
can
them?
share our website. Our website is www.risemagazine.org, and that is Rise with an S. I know some people are like, oh, do you guys spell it with a Z, like the cool way? I'm like, no, we
No.
use the regular S. It is Rise with an S,
Yes.
magazine.org. We did release our language glossary. If anyone wants any copies of it, there is a free digital download on our website. You can download it and share with everybody. Part of changing the system is changing our language. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Changing our language changes our minds and it changes how we think about things and it changes our lens. And I think that that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely right. I'm so grateful for you having been here today.
Thank you
So,
for having me.
thank you. Thank you so much. I can't wait to carry on having conversations with you.
I mean, I can talk about. I'm
I
like
know I could
passionate
keep
about
talking
this.
about this
I'm
forever, but
passionate about this stuff. I'm like, I can talk about this for hours. I had a similar discussion last weekend, and we were talking about this for like 2 hours, and I was like, "Yo, it's 11 o'clock. We do have to go home."
And I'm a golden girl now, so I got to wrap up for my bedtime, y'all. Okay, so as we draw our first session of Indomitable Conversations to a close, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you joining us today. Your presence, your questions, your engagement have made this conversation truly special. Our journey has only just begun, and I hope that you leave today feeling inspired and empowered to make a difference in the lives of those within the foster care system. Remember, it's not just about listening to our stories, it's about taking action. I encourage you to mark your calendars for our upcoming sessions throughout the next week, where we will continue to hear from incredible individuals who have faced the challenges of the foster care system head on. Tomorrow's guest speaker is C. Esselman, who is a licensed therapist who opened the Attached Place Center for Strengthening Relationships after years of struggling to find help with the attachment challenges and complex trauma of her two children whom she brought home from the foster care system over 24 years ago. She wants to answer questions about what foster parents need to know to improve the foster care system. So thank you so much to my incredible guest speaker, Mary Holiman, for helping me kick off the event. And of course, don't forget to pick up a copy of my new book, Indomitable, A Foster Care Story, to delve deeper into the journey that inspired this series. Thank you once again for your commitment to this important cause, and I can't wait to see you again tomorrow. Together, we are truly indomitable. Take care.